Are you interested in getting into backpacking for the first time, but you're a little intimidated by the cost of all that gear and just the cost of backpacking in general? Or maybe you're a backpacker who's used to doing weekend trips, but you kind of wonder if I have to go a little further afield and not just driving distance from home, what is the cost of a backpacking habit? I'm going to answer that question for you right now. I had high hopes for bringing you this video from a beautiful trail here in Colorado, but it has turned into a gray, rainy, sleety kind of day. So I changed my plans and decided to pick up a nice, fresh trail latte from Dunkin' and enjoy that and come to you from the comfort of my van. So here we are. Since I started my backpacking career about 7 years ago, I have learned a lot about backpacking, both short weekend trips and also long distance hiking. So I can share with you my experience as far as the cost of backpacking in 3 different categories. And I also want to let you know that I am kind of semi-retired now, and I fill my time when I'm not hiking by working for an outfitter. So I do have the opportunity to see new gear, to get a feel for prices of different types of gear. And because I like doing almost ultralight backpacking, really on the lower end of lightweight, I guess you would say, I also really like to explore cottage companies and see what they have and test out some of that gear myself. But that's the context for where my knowledge base comes from, and I hope that this is going to be helpful to you. When you're first starting out, you have to build a backpacking kit, and of course that means some startup costs to acquire the gear that you need. My first backpacking trip, I had like 2 weeks notice before I started. So I really had to scramble to find gear that I could afford. And it wasn't the most lightweight and it didn't necessarily fit me well. So I would caution you that if you are planning a trip, to get as much lead time as you can, especially if you're on a tight budget. The cost, maybe on average, or basically a not high-end setup for your initial backpacking kit, will probably run you anywhere between, say, $750 to $1,500. A lot of that depends on how lightweight the gear is that you buy, whether you buy it new or used. And you can save a tremendous amount of money actually buying used gear, because there are tons of people like me who like to upgrade periodically, and they sell their used gear on Facebook forums and other places. And you can even trade in used gear to REI and other sites online that will take back used gear and give you credit to buy more gear. So you can feed the habit that way if you like, as you get further and further into the backpacking experience. Another great way to save money on gear is to just look for end of season closeouts. The gear companies are getting ready to release their new gear options for the following year. They're going to be discounting all the gear that they've had in the past, particularly anything that's being discontinued. So look for that. And if you're really on a super tight budget, I would suggest maybe looking at gear that could be a little bit heavier from places like, Walmart or Amazon, or borrowing gear from a friend. And the caveat with that is what works for your friend might not work for you, but at least it's getting you out there on the trail so you can start to learn what you like and what works for you. But if you have a friend who's a size large pack and you're a really petite person, I definitely would not use that pack. But if it fits reasonably well, if you can take it into a store and get sized, and you know that that pack is fitting you appropriately, then it's okay to use borrowed gear. You can also rent gear, and when you rent gear, they will size you and they will find out what your needs are and help you understand the best gear to get started out. And that's actually a great way to know what you need before you go out and spend a lot of money. That cost at $750 to $1,500 can be really daunting for people that are like, oh, I want to go out in the woods. I just want to camp. And you can do it for less if you're a really hardy soul, if you just want to use a tarp instead of a tent and things like that. But for the most part, I think the average kit is going to be in that price range just for getting started. One other way you can save money is to be really judicious in what you take and not carrying more things than you need. So if you're looking at, well, what do I have to take backpacking? You don't need to buy a cup and a bowl and all those kinds of things. You can get a minimal amount of gear. Just take one spoon or spork instead of a whole set of camping serveware and that sort of thing. Keep it simple and really study the YouTube videos that are out there as far as the gear. I've got several from way back from my Appalachian Trail thru-hike to my gear picks for PCT and Colorado Trail running. So you can find a lot of advice, not just from me, but from a lot of other experienced hikers who can help you figure out how to trim your gear or to minimize what you buy in the first place to keep that budget in line when you are looking at setting up your first backpacking kit. And a final note on that is that no matter what you buy, if you're a new backpacker, you're going to find out that you want to make changes. So just be prepared that some of the things that you get might not work out for you. Check return policies if you want to be able to potentially return gear, or otherwise you might have to be just working with it for a while and using it until you can afford to upgrade. Upgrading and replenishment is the second category. It can get expensive to upgrade your gear, especially if you're trying to trim weight, because some of the ultralight companies, those things like a tent, a backpack, may cost double what you would pay for a heavier version. And if you're an older backpacker like me, then that makes a huge difference. And if you can afford it, then absolutely get the lightest weight that you can. Check reviews, make sure it's good quality gear and not just lightweight. So just for comparison, here are some examples of ultralight gear versus lightweight gear that you might be considering and what the price differences are like.
Starting with tents, the Hyperlight Mountain Gear is a very popular one-person tent for thru hikers, but it costs about $600. In contrast, you could pick up a lunar solar tent from 𝐒𝐮𝐲𝐬𝐬 Designs, which is an award-winning tent, for half of the price with slightly different materials. An upgrade to a two-person tent like the Nema Hornet that I carried on the AT, or the Big Agnes Tiger Wall. Both of these are mid-price tents and are very, very good. If you want a fully custom pack like this one from Light AF, you'll have to budget $400 to $600, although I don't recommend going custom for your very first backpack. Instead, try something like this pack from Osprey or a Gregory pack, something that you could have fitted in store and test before you commit. Or even this Flash pack from REI. It's an excellent pack. I have a friend that used it on the entire Continental Divide Trail, and he loved it. In general, a stock quilt or sleeping bag is going to be your most affordable option. Sleeping bags are easy to find, but quilts are a really popular choice for sleeping in the backcountry. 𝐶𝐮𝐩𝐸 makes a really interesting turnkey sleep system, and they also sell quilts all on their own. A custom quilt from Underground Quilts or Enlightened Equipment will cost you a bit more, probably $250 to possibly over $600 or $700. I got mine from Underground Quilts, and I have been really, really happy with it.
So that gives you an idea of the differential between ultralight gear and well-known companies. If they've got a great brand reputation, you might find a better bargain with a startup company. I would suggest just making a budget, and I have a gear spreadsheet that I use not only just to track what I'm taking on every trip, because it does vary a little bit, but I also keep track of the expenses and how much I pay for things. You could do the same thing and just make a spreadsheet as you're budgeting to buy a kit or update your gear and make some decisions that way. If you know what you want, you can sign up for emails from the companies that you're looking at. If you're buying direct, look for sales from them. You can ask your friends and family for gift cards or contributions to your backpacking upgrades. That's always nice if they can help you out with that. If the reason that you want to replace a piece of gear is because you have a performance issue with it, like maybe the buckle is not working the way that it used to, or maybe you've got a strap that's come loose. If you like that piece of gear, say, let's call it a backpack. If you love that backpack, then I would encourage you to reach out to the company that manufactures it and see if there's anything they can do to help you get it repaired and get more life out of it. After I did the AT, I had several pieces of gear that were starting to show their age, and I reached out to different companies and explained the situation to them. I told them that I had been through hiking with this gear, and several of them offered to replace items. Others offered to repair items, and so you can do that, and sometimes there's a charge, sometimes there's just a nominal fee for repairs. So look at that before you decide to replace gear, especially if it's gear that's working for you that you really like. Now, with that in mind, if you're reaching out to gear companies, you may hear them say something like, well, that gear has reached the end of its usable life. There are companies that will tell you one thru hike is the usable life of a tent, for example. Gear does wear out and it does get improved upon. So there may be times where you just have to look at a piece of gear and be like, well, that served me really well, but now it's time for something new. And that's when you need to set aside some money and start doing your research. As you're researching, look for durability, because a lot of times, especially as you go more ultralight, that gear is actually kind of delicate. Some of those fabrics are delicate. Maybe they don't have as much stitching or seam wrapping and things like that that would make a pack or a tent more durable. So just check it out and make sure that you're getting the durability that you expect in terms of the amount of money that you are spending, both when you purchase gear and when you upgrade gear. So when we get to the end of this video, I will let you know how I spent over $1,000 on hiking shoes, which may sound really exorbitant to you at first glance, but it will make sense when I share with you. But first, let me tell you the third area where you have backpacking expenses. And this really completely relates to how bad your backpacking habit is. For me, my goal this year is to do 4 through hikes of various lengths. I've got one under my belt because I just finished the Trans-Catalina Trail. I will be announcing my next one for the spring in just a few weeks, so stay tuned for that. Subscribe if you have not already, and you'll see that video when it pops up. The more trips that you go on, the more your backpacking habit is going to cost. And on top of that, the further away they are or the harder they are to get to, that's going to also increase your expenses. Travel expenses for my trip on the TCT, the Trans-Catalina Trail, added up and made that hike. It was a 38-mile hike, but it cost me $1,000 because I had to fly from Denver to California. I had to take a ferry to the island. And then I also had to pay for campsites because they require everybody to camp in a designated site. So that increased my expenses compared to, say, just going out on the Appalachian Trail and doing a section hike where you just hop on trail and you camp wherever you want. So that's a big difference in terms of expenses. But anytime that you need to travel to a trail, whether that is driving a long distance or flying or taking the train or even bus fare, those things can add up. So the more adventurous you want to be, the more different places that you want to explore, it's gonna cost you, unfortunately. Now, if you're lucky like me and you can live at least part-time in a van and you have a camper or something like that that you can travel in, then that helps because you're not spending money on hotels, but then you also have to figure out where to park. And if you park at a hostel, sometimes they charge you a fee per night just to leave your vehicle there, whether it's a camper van or something else. Shuttles also add to the expense if you're taking shuttles to and from the trail, if you're staying in hostels. Resupply, of course, you need to eat at home or on the trail, right? But sometimes you may find your expenses are higher because when you're going into town, you're spending money on food at restaurants and you're buying different kinds of food or not making food that you would normally make at home. Maybe you're buying backpacking meals and they can be pretty expensive. As you look at all the trails that you want to do, you should be thinking about the logistics as well. And what are those things cost? For me, my TCT trail was $1,000. When I did the AT, I tracked every penny and I was out for 7 months and I had a couple trips home during that time. And so that cost me about $10,000. Now that is including the cost of repairing and replacing gear that I needed to. And because that trail's a little over 2,000 miles, most hikers go through about 4 or 5 pairs of shoes. And my beloved La Sportiva 𝐒𝐻𝐻as are retailing right now for $175. So that is not cheap, although you can get them on sale. You can get last year's models just like you can for other backpacking gear. Shoes change every year pretty much. So you can look out and get sales that way. I've had at least maybe 8 or 9 pairs of those 𝐒𝐻𝐻as. I just picked up my latest brand new pair, which I'm excited about for my upcoming hike. At $175, that comes out to well over $1,500. And granted, that's over the course of the past 7 years that I've been backpacking. It does not include other shoes that I bought and tried. It does not include the Saucony Peregrines that I also really like, that I think I bought 3 pairs of those before I started the AT and then ended up switching because I was having some foot issues, which actually in hindsight, I don't think were from the shoes. It was because I wasn't using the right insoles, but live and learn, right? So you have those kinds of expenses for an ongoing backpacking hobby. Ways that you can save money on those ongoing expenses are, number one, to hike with a buddy. And if you can share transportation and drop a vehicle at each end of the section that you're going to be hiking, then that can save you some money. Doing Neros into town instead of zeros. Zeros, when you take a full day off hiking, you go in the night before and you leave the next day. And that means you have 2 nights of accommodations. A Nero puts you in the morning because you just camp near town and then hike in and do your thing. And you can even just dip into town and out again on the same day if you need to and camp both nights, or just spend 1 night in a hostel so you can do laundry and get showered. And that's half the cost of spending the 2 nights that a zero would cost. But permits are expensive, so if you choose to hike in areas where there are not permits, then that's going to save you money. Camping fees, like I had on the Trans-Catalina Trail, those cost money. But with that, there is the option to join the Catalina Trail Conservancy, and they give discounts to members on camping. So you can look for discounts like that for being members of different types of organizations, and that could save you some money. And then finally, taking public transportation to the trail if it's available, or using a trail angel instead of a shuttle driver can save money, because some trail angels will charge, but a lot of times they might take a donation for gas, or they might decline your offer of payment altogether. I've had that happen. Some people just love talking to hikers and helping them out, so they don't want to take anything for that because they get pleasure from the experience as well. If you do use trail angels for transportation, please, please be courteous to them and respectful and understand that they are doing this out of love and it's not their full-time job. So you can't expect them to drop everything in the middle of the night to come get you and things like that. Just be respectful of them. If you're paying a shuttle driver, of course you want to be respectful as well, but at least they are being compensated fairly for the work that they are doing. There are lots of options in different places for types of transportation. So here in Colorado, they have something called the Mustang, and that can get you to and from some of the trail towns. I used that a few times last summer when I was hiking the Colorado Trail because I had to come home when I was sick, and then had to come home also after I fell down those slope. You can see that video up here. It was kind of a scary experience. But I wanted to get back to the trail, so I took the Mustang, and then I stayed in a hostel and had a trail angel drive me back to the trail both times the next morning. And so that worked out really well, and I didn't have the cost of, say, renting a car or having a really long distance shuttle. And Mustang, I think, was like $15 or $30. That's really cheap. I went through New York on the Appalachian Trail when I was coming back from one of my trips home, and I took the train from New York City to this little whistle stop right by the trail. And that was a lot of fun, and it was also inexpensive, especially compared to the cost of getting a shuttle directly to that town. There are also places where when you're in town taking a zero, like Gatlinburg has a bus that is either free or very inexpensive. Vermont has a great public transportation system, so that helps if you want to get around in town or go from town to town, like from Bennington to Rutland. In Colorado, if you're in the Frisco area and you want to get over to Dillon, that's near Breckenridge, and you can ride free from Breckenridge to Frisco to Dillon. You can stop in the yard out there if you need to pick something up. It's a great way to do some resupply or take care of some gear. And you can also ride the bus from Copper Mountain to Breckenridge, which some people do just because they want a slack pack day over that mountain because it's a big mountain. It's a big climb. And actually, I did that the wrong way. I hiked over with my pack, and then I decided to take the bus back to Breckenridge to spend the night. So it wasn't the smartest move I've ever made, but it worked, and I didn't have to pay for the bus. I encourage you to, depending where you are, whatever trail you're doing, see what the options are for public transportation that could be cheaper than private transport and save you a lot of money there. So that's the breakdown of the three big categories of backpacking expenses. It is an amazing hobby, and if you haven't already been out there and you're just looking at getting into it, I highly encourage you to check it out because compared to a lot of other hobbies out there, it really is very expensive. And once you do have that initial kit, it can be really, really cheap to get out and just explore the area around where you live on different types of trails. And then when you're ready to go further afield or maybe even tackle a long distance trail like the Appalachian Trail or the PCT. So that's what I have for you today. I look forward to seeing you again next time. And if you have not already subscribed, I hope you will do that. You can just hit the button down below. And I appreciate you being here. Happy hiking.